Welcome to the Bright Room podcast. We interview founders, thought leaders, and everyday pirates to discover new approaches to old problems for a brighter tomorrow.
Inclusion and diversity as a topic for any global company. Diversity is a topic, right? So it's not about do we need it, do we not need it. Diversity is the reality of our world. It's nothing we need, it's there, right? It's the reality. So that's why I have my little issue with calling it diversity management, because what are you managing actually? Reality of the world. So I love to call it inclusive cultures. I love the concept of creating cultures that provides you exactly these three things that we just talked about, right? So in a work environment, you have the opportunity, like in no other place in the world, to create a common culture. Because outside of the company, you go about your life in these different circles of belonging that you are in, right? But in a company, you can come in and be part of a culture, of a way of thinking, a way of working, right? So the combination of all these things. And so creating an inclusive culture was paramount for me in my role. That's something that I wanted to do. And the other thing was, of course, belonging. So I'm an inclusive culture and belonging partner. And my role is to support every Spryker. I work for the company Spryker. And so to support all Sprykers into feeling comfortable in our company so that they can do their best work.
Hi, my name is Irina. I'm a coach, a psychologist, and the founder of Bright Room. Bright Room is a social network for learning and development. You can imagine it as Udemy, except the classes are happening live and you learn in small group with other people. We believe that in order to solve the really big problems our society is facing today, we need to get really good at working together. And that's a continuous journey of personal development, learning, applying, reflecting, and doing it all over again. So Bright Room is there to make this journey as easy and as engaging as it gets. This podcast was born in a desire to complement our mission of helping people work better together by sharing inspirational stories from people and companies who have an unconventional way of doing and being.
Today we're speaking to Lily Kriegs. Lily is a people and culture lead at a tech company. She's been quite inspirational for me in many ways. And one of which is the topic of belonging. So the reason why I wanted to speak to Lily today is just maybe like taking a step back. I personally have been living abroad for about, I guess, 13 years now, maybe, give or take. And what I've seen among other people integrating in Germany specifically, but also in other places, mostly I see two things happening. And one thing is that people either integrate fully in the new environment, but they dissociate a little bit from their past culture. So they're basically kind of switching one culture for another. Or they make their life comfortable through the circle of friends that they have, which, like, especially in Berlin, for example, where I lived for a long time, it's a very international circle, and it's very easy to set up your life in a very comfortable way through just interacting with people from other cultures. So it might seem that you've integrated because your life is just so comfortable now, but I don't think that's really what's happening. I think you just created your own bubble, but you haven't really, there isn't really a sense of true belonging or assimilation. And Lily, when we spoke, I felt that you're a unique example of the third option, which is more rare, is when you have an equal association with both your home culture and your new culture. And one of the things that just blew me away when we were speaking is when you said, I made myself belong. And this is when I knew, like, oh my God, like this, more people should hear your story. There's just so much agency in the statement. So yeah, today I would just love to hear you share your story, how, maybe just start from the beginning, where you come from, and then we kind of move on to how you got to where you are right now.
Thank you so much first of all, for the invitation. And I think, for a fact that I believe very much in encounters, in meaningful encounters with people, right? And I have to say that sometimes, you meet people that, are a lot of, you have a lot of connection with. And I think this is something that happens to me with you. Yeah. So it's reciprocal, let's say, this understanding of how inspired I feel your story is, and also like your courage, everything that you're doing. So let's start with that.
Thank you.
I thank you very much for the opportunity today to invite me to this podcast. And I'll happily share with you about this because, first of all, maybe to set the context and a little bit of the purpose as well, I feel that most of all in these really difficult times, right? So we are having difficult times, not like we didn't have before, because we did, right? But a lot of people do not know that we had those difficult times, but it is being difficult. The world is becoming very difficult, and a lot of people are finding it really difficult also to find circles of belonging, places where you feel like you are okay, you're safe, you pertain to a certain specific characteristics, etc. So it's not only a crisis of identity, it's a lot of a crisis of who is here with me, right? It's about ending isolation and loneliness, right? And so I guess that this is one of the reasons why this topic is so close to my heart. So less why identity and more why about making ourselves belong is so important, because we are social beings and we don't want to be alone. So at the end of the day, we want to be loved and we want to be understood. So we want to pertain somewhere. So
Yeah. What is
we-
what is belonging to you before we go, just so that we have some sort of common ground in terms of what do you understand
yes,
when you
and
say belong?
it's an excellent question. So for me, belonging is actually something that we share, the common thing that we have with each other. So when you think about this, is like this connection, right, that exists because of different reasons. So belonging pertains to a present, to a past, to a heritage, to a family, to a partnership, or to a friendship. When you think about it, it's like a little bit like you imagine these little circles, that you actually, so you are the center of your circles of belonging, right? So you express your circles of shared common values and shared common ideas with, let's say, the people more certain, but that are more close to you, but also you pertain to other circles that you happen to be in. So families, as an example, is a connection that you have with people because you were born into a family. Friends is a chosen circle, and culture is sometimes a thing that is a choice, and sometimes it's a thing that you were born into. And the fact that the more we grow up and develop this consciousness, of what belonging means to us, belonging as in what is my circle of shared connection, the more you realize how many of these circles are actually don't happening to you, but you are happening in these circles. Yeah. So, and I think with that, when you were saying about the third way, I think when we start with that is always something about the coincidence. So there is this beautiful word in English called serendipity. So for some reason, we find ourselves coinciding somewhere in the universe, right? So, and I'm not going to be mystic here about this. It's more about the idea of I was born in Mexico. I was born in a normal Mexican family, I would say. My mother was working very much, and she was working in a company, as an example. But she was there the whole day, right? And so her people that she was working with, she was the secretary of two German persons that were working in the city that I come from. I don't come from Mexico City, this international big metropolis or something like that. I come from a big city, because in Mexico, a lot of cities are very big, right, in comparison to Europe. But this city is more like a province when you think culturally, and also at that time at the most. And so I grew up in a already very dialectic family. My mother comes from a family that comes from the mountains, of Mexico. We had a lot of relationship there with our family that was more one part indigenous, some part of them very agricultural families. My grandfather was educated person, right? So he educated himself, and my mother was already working with 14 years old. You have to imagine that is a completely different kind of life that we can imagine. My father, on the other side, comes from the coast of Mexico, is a more traditional family as well, where, so he was the first person attempting to go to study in the city, but as well as a very traditional picture of what families are, how they belong. So when I told you this sometime in one of our conversations, that my life is very much series of coincidences, and at the end of the day, as well as choices that I very consciously made at some point. But one of these coincidences was this relationship that my mother, working as a secretary to these people that happened to be founders of the German school in the city that I was working on, because a lot of German people were coming to my city because of Siemens and other companies. So they said to my mother, your child is going to be in the age of going to kindergarten. Why don't send her to the German school? No connection to Germany at all, right? So unless my mother working with these people. And so I end up in this privileged private German school with a scholarship that they were paying for me the first years. And afterwards, I had to, my own scholarship by having good grades, being a good student and working a lot with the school. But that is the first, coincidence that gives you the gift of another culture, just like, right? So navigating this was extremely interesting, because for me as a person of, I always have been very grateful to opportunity, right? So, I mean, what a privilege to have, right? What a satisfactory kind of sort of events in your life, right? That you are able to do something like this. So for me, it was amazing. And I have to tell you, like, the family of my father was like, why are you doing that? Why are you allowing her? I was extremely grateful for this opportunity. And for me, it was like amazing. My mother was we were happy about this. Like the family of my father was like, why are you doing this? So you have nothing to do with this, other culture. And it wasn't about the culture. It was about not doing what everybody else was doing. Why are you doing that? Right. And there was also a sense of you don't belong there, because there are only rich kids. So to this point, you are, I don't know, 9, right? So 9 years old, and you're already being told by other people that you don't belong. And it's not even the circle you are interacting with in the German school, right? So, but it's...
How is your feeling in the school? So, okay, some people, well, close people, so that's pretty important. We're telling you that you do not belong there. But how was your perception at this school?
There was several times that I was afraid of don't belonging, because you knew that this was an opportunity that you couldn't afford on your own. So, and this consciousness, this being conscious about this, like if you screw up, sorry my language, but if you screw up, then you cannot go to the school anymore. So it was a lot of pressure, definitely, so to keep going, like the good grades and doing the good things. But I also knew that, I was good at school and I was mastering whatever they were putting on my plate. So because of that, and, having this choice of, I make myself belong into this place because I am as clever as everybody else. I can actually manage to do this. I speak German, even though I have nothing to do with Germany. So you choose to belong and don't feel different at some point. Were there differences? Of course. Of course. There were many moments, let's say, you come back from summer vacation, because I was in the German school for 15 years. I grew up with these people. These are my people, they're like my family. We grew up together. And there were very funny conversations about like, what did you do, in your summer vacations? And you're like, well, my mother was working the whole summer, my father was working. So we were at home. I don't know, reading, watching movies. You never did something different. Sometimes we went to the coast, but that was more like a family vacation where your colleagues or the people in the school were like in San Diego and Disneyland and, you name it. So it was not that you didn't notice that there is a difference in the ways of life, etc. But I don't remember any instance that somebody from my little circle, gave me the feeling that I didn't belong, So I think the reason was a lot more about like, well, I'm good at school, so we were learning together, you were doing so many things together, and we knew each other from little on. So there was no real feeling of othering. I love this word because it's like the opposite to belonging, right? So to other somebody else, you're different. I think that was a very important feeling to have, because becoming a teenager, right? You notice things even more, right? So when there are, I think every student living abroad or studying abroad and not having that much money knows exactly how it feels like, right? That everybody goes for a coffee and you're like counting your euros if you can actually afford one, or going to the cinema, or having dinner with friends at someplace. So I think this is something that gives you sometimes this challenge of you're retreating and saying, well, I don't belong here, so I have to be different, I have to feel different. Or you say like, I can go with you, I cannot eat in that restaurant, so I'll have a drink. That's fine with me. It's just about meeting you, or I meet you later, and that was okay. So
that's quite amazing, actually. I mean, you say it so casually, all of it, but what I guess, like the learning that I'm taking away so far is that your kind of inner stance to the situation and just your decision to, again, like making yourself belong and just be unfazed by all of those things. Well, first of all, what other people say, whatever differences there might be. I think your inner stance also maybe made it easier for other people to accept you and to not create those barriers yourself. Because I could imagine that in many cases, what could have happened there is that you would feel uncomfortable. Yeah, you wouldn't go for a coffee or for a dinner with those people, or you would just feel already defensive even before starting to interact with anyone, but by just thinking that I don't belong here. My dad told me I don't belong here and everybody looks different, and already thinking that, I mean, because people feel everything, so then people would kind of read it off you, and that would just become a self-fulfilling prophecy that just continues to snowball. But it seems like your decision to just, I'm here. I mean, there are differences. I'm dealing with them in whatever way I can, but that doesn't make me outside of the group or anything. I think that was probably the fundamental enabler for creating this sense of belonging.
It's not like it doesn't affect you, the differences, right? So you know that there are differences in capability, in the sense of physical capability. Like, very simple example. So my parents couldn't bring me somewhere or pick me up from somewhere. And we're talking a big city. So sometimes I was definitely dependent on the goodness, and of the willingness of other people to pick me up or bring me to my house, or if they would invite me somewhere, then, to bring me home. And I remember this anecdote that I found that I would love to share with you, because it takes a lot of this story about belonging, right? So I was already a teenager. I was, I don't know, almost 17, something like that. And one of my friends, very good friend of mine, there was a very, from school as well. So we were thinking about going to the center of the city, which is, there were times I'm a kid of the 90s, right? So we had all this hippie thing going on. And, in the center of the city, there was lots of markets where we would buy like folkloric stuff and earrings and, all these kind of things. But it was also it was said to be a very dangerous kind of zone in Mexico, right? So in my city. So my friends weren't allowed to go there with their cars because my friends, their parents or their families were afraid that their cars would get stolen. So we had this situation where my friend called me and said, like, I would love to go. I don't know how to go. And I said, like, look, I will pick you up. I will pick you up at your house, and then we will go with the bus. With the public bus, we're going to drive into the center. And it was such an amazing experience because then I could, for me, it was the most natural thing to do, to just go into the public bus. And then, it was the whole experience for him. He was really grateful, and we were having a lot of fun having this experience together. And I think back to your question, that is actually for me belonging is exactly finding these moments where you can share something with someone, So it's a moment we belong. It's in this case, it was maybe his exclusion then, if he couldn't go with us to these markets because he couldn't bring his car to this place. And so the invitation of belonging, like, let's make it happen in some sort of way, come into my world, you belong to. It's never a question of going into privilege. It's about sharing something with someone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it also seems like it's a takes two, I guess, that it takes one person to be open to new experiences, and it takes the other one to meet them halfway, I guess, to enable it. And it can be very, I mean, here it was very practical, but I could imagine that it can also be something more metaphorical and ephemeral.
Absolutely. You just say something that just triggered my thinking very, very much. And it takes two. I think the question of belonging is also something that we feel, and most of all when we are in a different country or, in a different setup, in a new company. And all of a sudden you feel like as a person, and this is human, right? So we feel like we are dependent on others to be accepted. Which is true in some sort of way because we are little animals, right? So we need to feel safe first. When we feel safe, then we can connect, right? So first we need to know that this is okay, this is safe. Then I can connect with you in some sort of way, try to find out what can we speak the same language? How can we understand each other some sort of way? And when that happens, when we can connect, then we want to be understood, right? And the epitome of all of this is, of course, then we can be loved, then we can be, and not love in a passionate way. I mean, love as in validation, as in seeing myself for who I am and seeing yourself for who you are. And I think this is a process, this is a process of, every process of belonging requires always both sides. Right? And there are reasons why we other ourselves, just like you said in the beginning, right? So we feel like we don't belong, so we don't even try, right? And we find circles where we can belong without exposing our vulnerability to transform ourselves into something we don't know what could happen with us. Yeah?
Yeah.
And the other way is, of course, transforming completely and forgetting nobody should know that I didn't belong at some point, right?
Yeah.
Because that's othering too. We other what we were, in this situation. Then this thinking about this process about two people, it's always about what do we share, right? And it can be, sometimes we as expats or migrants, immigrants, sometimes we don't share the past, but we can share the future, And we are sharing, obviously, the present. So what else is there? There are so many other things that we could share. And yes, we have differences. Let's talk about it,
Yeah. You were studying already in German in that school.
Yes.
So you were just immersed into the German culture.
Well, the German school, when I was in the school, we had German as a second language. So everything that I learned was in Spanish. And then I had like German as a second language. The kids now in the German school where I went, they have tons of things in German already. So they are much more proficient in German than I was. I learned German when the school sent me in an exchange program to Cologne in a school. I didn't speak really nothing. Like I could say hello, guten Tag, and the most important things, but I couldn't hold a conversation really. Yeah. It came to a point at some point because, you need interaction, so you make yourself with signs and everything, and you get creative. And that I think that is also something that I encourage people to always think about creative ways of showing connection to others. It's about the intention to connect. It's never about saying the right words or saying the right things. So the German language is so amazing. It's such a language that you can combine words and put more words together, and it becomes bigger, bigger, bigger. And there is no
There's no stopping it. That's for sure.
Exactly. So you learn about just using this kind of creativity in order to, if you don't know what to say, how to say it right, you do it around it. You try to describe something on something like that. But it makes a difference for the other person that you're trying. It's validating the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's about signaling the openness to connect more than being, I don't know, grammatically correct or whatnot. Okay, so fast forward, you finish your school and then you move to Germany already for good to go to the university. Tell me a bit more about that time, because I guess that one was the real immersion in the culture, which was already not for an exchange or anything. That was already like, okay, now you're here in the country for the long term. How was it for you?
This is one of these transitions that you do as a life choice. So you make the choice that yes, you're going to have it hard, because you can always stay in the known, and in the things that we know, and then try our way. And it might not have been good for me to stay there, but it would have been easier, right? So to stay where I was. But it was a decision. I wanted to go to Germany. I felt like there were many things that I love about, my culture, my heritage, my country. But there are also, I was a woman in the 90s. Yeah, so we're talking here a complete different society. One of my wishes was to see the world, think differently, live somewhere abroad that I could develop myself differently. Yeah, not career. We're not talking. We're not there. You're 19, right? So there is no. So that was not the thing. It was more about freedom. It was more about being yourself. So I go to Germany. I study there, and something super interesting happens. When you come to Germany, or back in the day, I have no idea if this is still the case, but when you have, even coming from a German school, I had to do another year of validation of my Abitur, right? So my, what's the name? Secondary school, or the, no, you know what I mean? So the general school for entering the university. So when you have to do that, you enter a so-called Studienkolleg, which is a place where you are there with all people from all over the world, right? When you come from a country like Mexico, you don't have actually that much exposure and exchange with people from all over the world, because it's such a big country that, of course, you meet a lot of American people, who come on vacation. Back in the day, we didn't have internet. So we're talking about my first time seeing people from Japan, or experiencing people from Morocco, my friends from Moldavia. I had never heard of some of those countries before. And it was super interesting for me the first time to be with other cultures and everything. But something I noticed was also I had two circles of friends, the ones from school that were always with each other because we didn't have anyone else, right? But I had someone else. I was living in a guest family. It was, again, coincidence, right? I was living in a German family, and I had friends, German friends, where I was living. And it was a completely different experience than for me, because I came in, I was part of these people, I was in the neighbor, I was celebrating Carnival in my first year, not with friends. I was actually, with the older people, working there and getting all the jokes, etc. And so it was a complete different experience. So what happened to me was I was bridging a lot between my friends from Studienkolleg and the Germans, because we were this understanding of who these other people are is very much in your head, So when you give the opportunity to, you give yourself the opportunity as well to get to know these people, then there are just people. There are nice ones and not nice ones, but in everywhere. That was one interesting thing. And the other interesting thing is I had my issues with my own people in the university, So my best friends were not Mexican. They were some from Latin America, some German, some, everybody was like very, very, but I didn't search for my cultural circle. It was difficult for me because I couldn't do othering, and this identity by othering, we are different because we are this and not that, wasn't me, was never me. I mean, I grew up completely different from that, right? And so I think that was like a big, big no for me to say, if I want to belong, I need to stay away from people who keep telling me that I don't belong because I want to belong.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So basically, there were I guess three social groups. There was the German circle that you were part of. Then there was this expat circle, and then there was the Spanish speaking circle, I guess. And the expat circle, the glue was we have something in common, as in like we all come from different backgrounds and we have this shared experience of being in a new country. So you felt comfortable there because it was based on inclusion rather than exclusion.
Exactly.
And the other circle was more, I guess it could have been framed similarly, as in like we have something common as in the language, but I guess in that case it was more, I was like, we more from this other position of like we are not the same as other.
Yes.
And so that was more based on the exclusion, and that's why you didn't feel comfortable with that circle.
Yes. I mean, it has a lot to do with identity, and I believe that for everyone who goes and lives all of a sudden somewhere else, experience this moment when you don't know if you belong here or there, and then you start thinking who you are, what are your values and your beliefs and, all these things. And I absolutely know that this is super scary time, because you need to find some anchors in who you are in order to make the right decisions according to your values and your principles, right? And so when your identity is based on who you are not, and then exactly this is what this identity crisis happens when you integrate into another culture or another country or something else, and then all of a sudden you're scared that you're losing something that was really important to you, that makes you, like this is your ingredients. And the feeling comfortable with taking the risk of transforming into something new, it's, I think, takes a lot of yourself and also a lot of courage to decide for others that you belong.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something that maybe is also the root cause of why sometimes it's hard to belong, is this maybe feeling that we are binary in the sense that if I belong here, automatically it means that I don't belong there. And kind of connected to this differentiation and us versus them. But actually, if you open yourself up to the possibility that you can equally belong in multiple groups, then it's fine. It's not so scary anymore because you don't need to be excluded from your home culture just because you also feel included in the other culture. But yeah, as you said, it definitely takes a lot of courage because some people will think that they will think that you don't belong here anymore, and it just comes back to making yourself belong despite of what other people might project onto you.
Yes, such a beautiful way to say that. I think, I notice how much I change every time I came back to visit my hometown, as an example. And I also noticed that with time and with age and everything, with life experience, let's put it like that. It's not nothing about the years, it's about the life experience. I also grow more open for accepting the things that were there, so the aunts and cousins that you never wanted to talk to because they're strange, all of a sudden I can have conversations without them affecting me in any way, even though they're judgy and, my lifestyle and tattoos and whatever, don't care. But it's still, for me, it was an interesting understanding also, like how you don't really belong as you belonged before, but there are still some shared components. And I think this makes the whole difference, So you said like this binarity, if that word actually exists, but you know what I mean? The dualism of,
Yeah, duality,
of
right.
identity, exactly. So of identity is actually, it's all in our heads, right? The fact is we have intrinsic circles. So we are you and I today, speaking about this topic, but, outside of this, we can be partners, we can be colleagues, we can be friends, So there are many things depending on where we are, how we interact with each other, something that we share with each other. And you don't have to share everything in order to belong to each other at some point.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that how you say that you like belonging in a different way. It's a different kind of belonging. And again, I hear a lot of agency there that you don't let other people define what you should base your belonging on.
Yes.
So whatever kind of traditions or whatnot, what maybe translates to belonging, it doesn't have to be that way. So you can actually define it and co-create it with other people by actively trying to find this common ground, even if it's not something that it used to be in the past or it's supposed to be in that circle or that culture. You can actually find it actively in whatever environment that you find yourself in.
Absolutely. And what one topic that comes to mind when we think about this, losing this sense of agency on how we choose if we belong, if we're good enough, if we can actually call ourselves this or that, is this so-called also like imposter syndrome. It's about us also not being part of something or good enough for something, right? And a lot of it is again being in our heads. A lot of it is also like just taking a step back and thinking about like, why do I want to belong here? I made a decision because something. So I came to Germany to study to Germany because that was the second culture that I grew up with. Definitely more than anything else behind that. It was Europe. There was tons of opportunities for me to see the world differently. But and most of all as well, because I wanted to think and see where it takes me when I'm free, free from everything and also with the responsibility to myself. So you learn this agency. So otherwise you were sitting there waiting for somebody to invite you to participate. So you need to make yourself participate in the society that you chose to live, right? So if I'm in Germany, then I look for opportunities to participate in my community, to contribute to my community, to offer my help in my community. This is not only my wish, it's my responsibility because I belong here, right? So I want to participate. And I think this is an important topic also for a lot of expats, for a lot of us at the beginning of the time, is you don't know where to participate. Where can you exist in this society all of a sudden and exist in a participative way? So where you are belonging because you are part of the decision making, you are contributing actively to the society, you are being respected in the society as well. And I think when these three things happen, you know where you belong.
Yeah, so three things. Let's recap. Participate,
Contribute.
contribute, feel respected, and participate.
Yes.
Okay. It's a nice formula.
Yes.
I know that you also do a lot on the topic of belonging in your company. So maybe you can also share a little bit, your experience over there. I know you're a very multicultural company. What are you noticing? What are, I don't know, maybe the challenges in terms of finding this common ground for people from different cultures, and how do you support them?
Yes. When I was talking to our VP of People and Culture about my role, we were thinking about different things. And of course, one of the topics that were very close to my heart was culture and, inclusion and diversity as a topic for any global company. Diversity is a topic, right? So it's not about do we need it, do we not need it. Diversity is the reality of our world. It's nothing we need, it's there, right? It's the reality. So that's why I have my little issue with calling it diversity management, right? Because what are you managing actually? Reality of the world. So I love to call it inclusive cultures. I love the concept of creating cultures that provides you exactly these three things that we just talked about, right? So in a work environment, you have the opportunity, like in no other place in the world, to create a common culture. Because outside of the company, you go about your life in these different circles of belonging that you are in, right? But in a company, you can come in and be part of a culture, of a way of thinking, a way of working, right? So a combination of all these things. And so creating an inclusive culture was paramount for me in my role. That's something that I wanted to do. And the other thing was, of course, and belonging. So I'm an inclusive culture and belonging partner. And my role is to support every Spryker. I work for the company Spryker. And so to support all Sprykers into feeling comfortable in our company so that they can do their best work. And so when you think about the three things that we just mentioned before, about what it is to belong, is about how can you contribute best, right? What do you need to be accommodated with or you need to provide in order for you to collaborate and contribute best to this company, right? So, and that's where things are important about, like, how to work with me. How can I be much efficient, right? Or can you do some accommodation for me, like working remotely, or letting me work at night because that's my focus time or something like that. So that's the one thing about how I collaborate and contribute best. And as well, inclusion and belonging is about participation, right? So how can I know that I'm being valued and seen and my contributions are being impactful? So I'm participating in this company by creating impact that I can see and measure and, communicate properly to other people. And at the end of the day, it's a lot about recognition and acknowledgement of my work. And so and that's the interesting part, where culturally speaking, we see these things completely different, right? So there are cultures where recognition and awareness, let's say, my contribution of my impact is rewarded differently than in other cultures. There are cultures where humility is the highest and most important thing to protect, let's say, right? And so in my job, when you talk about creating an inclusive culture, first and foremost, you need to assume that we are not on the same page, that everybody has a different belief and value understanding on these things, on how it works to have these three things to belong. So my job is to try to find always a way to integrate somebody, help somebody into the culture and say, look, this is what we do. This is why we do it. How can you bring it together with your same values, let's say, so that we can share this experience when we are at work? You know, it's not about converting anybody or, creating cults of companies or anything else. So it's more about really and truly giving people the support they need in order to contribute, participate, and feel respected and seen.
That's interesting. So it sounds like, I guess, what I'm seeing is fundamentally when it comes to building the culture together, there's kind of two ways to go about it. One is that, well, I'm not sure how far that goes, but at least like the attempt is for somebody to decide, this is how we do things. This is going to be our culture. And then everybody who joins need to be trained on how to fit in and assimilate in this culture. And then there is more the root of enriching culture and co-creating in a way where you find this middle ground between what's already there, however it came about, and with the new people that come in and bring in something new, and you kind of see, okay, how do we bring it all together to achieve whatever we want to achieve and do it in an enjoyable way for everyone while we're at it. So sounds like you're doing the latter approach.
So if you ask me, I definitely believe in the second way. And maybe a little picture to make it some kind of more understandable is, the sparrows, right? So when they're like sparrows are beautiful birds and they are free and they fly around, etc. And so at some point they fly together. You see these bird formations that make beautiful movements, etc. And so at every time new ones come in, and then the formation changes again and the direction changes again. And some things happen, like different winds and weather. And sometimes they need to find some safe space for a while or something like that. And then with every new bird, let's say, the possibilities are different and bigger, right? So and they keep moving and creating. And so culture is ever evolving. And so, of course, there are some specific things to companies. We have a mission and a vision of what we're trying to achieve as a company, and we should never forget that. So we're talking about the work environment, and so there needs to be a clarity of what are we trying to achieve. This is one of the most important commonalities that we have, the shared goal, right? So where are we going? And then we can fly around and move around, and co-create in order to get there. But how we fly, how we move, that's something that becomes part of this journey, cultural journey that we co-create. That's why I was mentioning not the
I love
cult.
this analogy. Yeah. I like this analogy. Two last questions that I would like to ask you. Well, first is just, any final notes that you want to share, any, advice, any anecdote that's kind of top of mind for you on this topic of belonging.
I think I'll go back to the first thing that I said before. You feel like the world has never been so interconnected like we are at the moment. So the technology has opened so many doors for us, actually, to be much more interconnected. And that means that we cannot go by thinking that we are so different from everybody else. I think for us as humans, we can recognize that we're humans, and that's the first thing, that we all belong where we are, and we have the right to belong, and we have also like the opportunity to belong. So I would love to make this example of loneliness. So loneliness comes a lot from having the feeling that you don't have anyone around you and that you don't belong nowhere, right? And I think that this is something where we can definitely find our circles of belonging in order for us to feel much more connected to the world, you know? And it might not be the bakery person who might not be in their best day, you know, and doesn't treat you right at the beginning of the day. But it might be a conversation like today. It might be a coincidence, right? And it does, because you don't have it beside you, doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yeah.
I think I would love word of encouragement. I think that is something that I would love to encourage people to do is belonging is a choice. You are not dependent on other people to let you belong. If you want to contribute, to participate and be respected or being seen, then get yourself out there. You know, have the courage. Will it be easy? Not always. But you can learn to take, you know, the little steps. Be grateful to yourself for giving yourself the opportunity to just be there. You can ask, you know, you cannot imagine how many times I go and say, like, I would support you with this. I can help you with this. And you know that I don't want anything for it, right? So you ask me for my help, I can help, right? But many times I get like this, like, what do you want for it? You know, or why are you asking this? And it's like, I always say, like, because I belong here. I live here. This is my community. So I want to contribute with whatever I have, whatever the only thing that I have right now is maybe my experience, my words of, you know, my shoulder to cry on, or any words of advice that I can give listening to you, right? I don't have money. I don't have this. I don't have that. But this is who I am and this is how I can contribute. That should be enough.
Yeah, that's a very inspiring note to end the conversation on. Last question. It's not so much a question to you, but it's an ask to you. I want to experiment with something. I want to create a chain of questions. So I want you to ask a question that you don't know who's gonna go to, because you don't know who's gonna be the next conversation. But I will ask this question to the next person that I talk to, and then it's just going to be a chain of those questions going forward. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I thought it could be interesting to play around with that and just have this mystery question that's coming from somebody else and connecting you with people who you don't even know, maybe. So I know I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't ask you to prepare this in advance.
I love the idea. I love the idea. And I love these moments of like coincidence and serendipity. Yeah. So if I'm thinking about a question that you can ask the next person, it can be really like, what do you associate with happiness?
That's a nice question. Okay. What do you associate with happiness? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask it to the next person and I'm going to tag you so that you don't miss it and you hear what they say.
Yes. I will be looking forward to it. I thank you very much for the invitation today.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been really inspirational. Although we've already kind of touched on this topic a little bit, but it's been for me reinvigorating again and very inspiring and definitely encouraging me to be, I guess, more courageous also in this topic.
And have more fun, Irina. Have more fun integrating.
Yeah, exactly.